Welcome everyone to another episode from Off the Arrow Shelf. I'm Rob, and today I'm going to give a quick podcast recording about something that's been inspired by another archer that runs a YouTube channel, 3D Archery. Greg over there did an article on points and field points for carbon arrows, and what I'm going to do is do an equivalent or something that's hopefully equivalent for wooden arrows. So starting from the beginning, I'm going to talk about the actual materials that are involved. So you can have steel arrow points like these, a variety of different steel points that are there. You can have brass, which are very nice and shiny to begin with, but they corrode and get slightly less shiny over time. And you can even get aluminium or aluminum points, which are very, very light, but not as hard wearing. Might be able to just see if I stand up and show this to the camera. You might just be able to see that one had a bit of a dent in the end, so I'll take a file to that. And these are actually from my son's first bow all those years ago. So 3 different materials, they've all got good elements to them. The metal ones, obviously steel ones, can rust over time. You can just see a little bit of corrosion on that one. The brass ones, again, they oxidize a bit, so they lose their nice shiny color. So 3 materials. I'm going to tell you which ones I use. I tend to use the steel ones. I used to use the brass ones, but after a couple of shoots where I found that the brass points were coming off, I got a bit fed up with them and decided to go to steel, and I haven't looked back. So that's the first thing, materials. How they attach onto the arrow is different as well. You can have ones that are classified as taper fit, or you can have ones that are parallel fit. So let me just grab an arrow. There you go. So here we go. This is an arrow where I've taken the point off. Can't remember why, but this was tapered down. And what you use is you use a tapering tool like this. So there's a 5/16, 1132. There's another one there, which is a 3 Rivers archery one, which is 1132. And all you do, you'll see that this one's got 2, so you've got a knock and you've got a pile end. All you would do is put it in, and basically like a pencil sharpener, you taper the end down to a point, such as this, and then you would apply, such as this. Oh, my stuff's all rolling off the side now. And then what you would then do is you would grab a suitable point and fit it on with a little bit of glue. Now, that's great. They work pretty well. However, what can happen with a taper is that if the arrow impacts something hard in a target, maybe it hits the ground, what tends to happen is it will break just here, just behind where the pile actually sits. So if you imagine that going all the way down, it would break just about here, and then you'd end up with a piece of wood stuck in your pile. And there's a YouTube video on how to remove those with a shorter arrow. Now, that was a bit of a weak point, and the other option are parallel fits, and that's what I moved to. Parallel fit, this is a fitting device. These are from Top Hat, and grabbing that shaft again, what you do with this is you actually, it slides over the shaft, and inside there is a little thread cutter. If you imagine that's going to screw on, I take this back on, and normally what you'd do is you'd fit this into a power tool, power drill, and then you might be able to just see that the thread's been cut into it. You slide that on, and you can just screw that on, and that then holds on quite nicely without the need of any glue. I do put a dab of glue on mine, but that's just personal preference, just to make sure it doesn't come off accidentally. And those are parallels. I find them a lot more durable. You don't tend to find that the arrow breaks just behind the point if it hits something hard. So they work really well. So parallel, they slide over the shaft. Taper, you have to effectively use your pencil sharpener. And oops, there you go. you have to taper it down for the point to slide on. Okay, so taper, parallel. I said I prefer parallel now. Next thing, after that, you've got to start thinking about the actual shapes of them. Now you can see here, you might be able to see there, these are the steel points, and you've got a variety of different brass points. And you've got one horrendous one, which I can't remember where I picked that up from, but it's a horrible tight file, and that would actually be unusable in fast because all these sides are really sharp and would actually do a lot of damage to 3D targets. So I'll just put that there for now. Okay, so why is the shape important? Well, there's two main kind of shape differences. There's the bullet head, and then there's the variety of different field points. So there's a couple of examples. A lot of longbow archers I know use these, and they work really well if they go into a foam boss or a straw bale. I don't feel they work as well when it comes to 3D targets, and that's because I believe that, and what I've seen happen, especially from a low poundage bow, is that if the target is square on, then they tend to go in. But if it's angled or in any way or off center and you're shooting at it, there's a chance of when you hit of glancing off more. And that's what I've seen with using light poundage bows with some 3D targets. Not all 3D targets, because some 3D targets are quite soft and they do take the arrows quite well. So I moved away from these. I'm not a big fan of them. And I've gone to, originally I started using these, which worked quite well because they were a point and then they go down and get a lot less glance off. The problem I had with these piles is actually fitting them on because they were a taper fit, a bit of a faff to do. I tried these, which were again point and then shaped, but again I didn't get on with them as well as I would have liked. I swapped to steel, and again you can see steel has got a huge selection. It's all down to the different manufacturers. The so does field or 3D points. I actually used this style, which has got quite a pointed shape to begin with and then flares out. I found that didn't tend to glance off as much, and those are my preferred points. They're hundreds. They're 70 grains. I'll come to weight differences in a minute. I prefer those. I find they work well on 3Ds as well as paper faces. And for my competition flatbow arrows, I use those, which is a very, very similar shape. So generally, all-rounder arrow, I find those arrow points, I should say, I find that to work really well. So you've got the factor in the shape, you've got the factor in the materials that you're going to be using, whether it's aluminium, brass, or whether it's steel. I mentioned weight. These all weigh different amounts. You've got 70 grains, 80 grains, 100, 120, and it depends on what you're shooting. So this is my 80 grains, if I remember correctly, for my 1132, and this is my little grain scale. I find this particularly useful. I'm not sure if you're able to read that very easily, but drop it on there, and there you go, 80 grains, and that's for my 1132 shafts. I'd use an 80 grain rather than 100 simply because I find that the trajectory works better for myself and for my bow. However, you can have lots of different weights. So this is another one, 125. Take that off. That should be a 60, but you can see that was showing us 59. So there can be a grain difference in it. That's, again, 99. Now, so that would be 160s. You've got some 70s here. And the idea of all of these, 100. The idea of all of these is so that you can actually tune in your arrow for what you need it to do for your bow. So you might want to have a lighter point weight or a heavier point weight. And you can get some which have effectively a fitting over the shaft like that. And then you can screw points in. And I think those are done by Top Hat and they're quite nice. I've not got any of those yet. I'm debating about playing around and getting some. So, a couple of things I've said. Shape plays a part. you know that point weight, if you've got a high point weight up front, it changes the dynamic spine of the arrow. If you've got light point weight up front, it will increase the spine of the arrow. You've got to think about the size, whether it's 1132, 5/16, or even smaller in some cases. You've got so you've got shape, materials, whether they're parallel fit, whether they're screw fit. The last thing I was going to say is how do you actually adhere them to the actual arrow? So this you might be able to see the actual glue still showing on this because I've taken the point off, and that was probably through hot melt. Hot melt comes as, I'm just going to get a bit closer to the camera so you can see this. Hot melt is like a glue stick which you can heat up, and what you do is you heat it up with a candle or gas ring or something like that. You can use lighter. Put a little bit on, and then before it sets, you get the pile, you slide it on, and you screw it on or you push it on. And some of these have a screw thread, and the screw thread are far better than just the push on ones because it bites and holds onto the arrow. I've used hot melt a lot. I've moved away from using it now for a lot of my arrows, simply because yes, it's easy to add and remove points, but what I have found, I've had some bad experiences where the hot melt has softened, partly due to the friction of going into the targets, and then that's resulted in the piles actually being left in the target. So I've moved away from using hot melt, and I now use something like this is a Gorilla Glue. It's a two-part epoxy glue which you mix together in small quantities, offer it up onto the arrow shaft just as before, and you slide it on. It holds a bit better. It holds a bit more consistently than I found that with hot melt. Okay, that's the basics. As I said, you've got materials, aluminium, brass, steel. You've got the point weights to consider as to what point weight you want to go with, whether you want to go with an 80, a 70, 100, and that's going to partly be dependent on what arrow shaft you're going to be using. So, for example, that's a 5/16. That's an 1132 shaft, so it's quite a bit thicker, and it's going to be down to what you can actually get from different manufacturers. You've got the shape, and as I said, I've gone for ones that are like these, which are a little bit more a field point, or sometimes called 3D point or field points, simply because I find they actually go in better than the bullet heads that I showed you earlier. And finally, you've got how you adhere them to the actual arrow shaft. That's it, guys. I hope that's been useful. If so, hit the like button. Think about subscribing to my channel, and let me know if there's anything else you might like. And Greg, 3D Archery, thank you very much for inspiring this video. Take care.